I have worked with horses for 40 years, and in that time, I have learned that there are two kinds of people in the world: those who understand horses and those who think they do. The first kind listens. The second kind shouts. My name is John Yardley. I am 50 years old, the head groom at the Duke of Lyndhurst's estate, and the only time in 4 decades I have seen a person shout at a duke and be right about it was the afternoon Harriet Ridley fought His Grace over a horse for 3 hours, in the middle of a county fair, and won. I should explain the horse, because the horse is where everything started. Her name was Sovereign, a bay mare, 4 years old, 16 hands, with a deep chest, clean legs, and the kind of movement that makes a horseman stop whatever he is doing and watch. She was the finest horse I had seen in 20 years. She was also for sale, which is why the Duke and I were at the Ashford Fair on a Thursday in October. The Duke needed a hunter, and I had heard that Ridley's stud farm had something worth looking at. The Duke of Lyndhurst was 34 years old, proud, commanding, and an excellent horseman. I will grant him that. He rode hard, and he rode well, and he had an eye for a horse that was nearly as good as mine, but he had a habit common to men of power and fortune. He assumed that if he wanted something, the wanting was sufficient. He walked through the world expecting it to arrange itself around his preferences, and it usually did, because he was a duke, and dukes do not hear the word no often enough to develop a healthy respect for it. Harriet Ridley was 25 years old, the daughter of the late Thomas Ridley, who had built the finest small stud farm in the county before his heart failed him 3 years ago. Harriet had taken over. She ran the operation alone, breeding, training, breaking, selling, with the help of 2 stable hands and a competence that the county's horsemen acknowledged with the grudging respect they reserved for women who were better at their work than they were. She was tall for a woman, long-limbed, brown-haired, with strong hands and a direct gaze that did not adjust itself for rank. She wore riding clothes, not a habit, not a side-saddle costume, but practical riding clothes, breeches and boots, and a man's coat cut down to fit. And she stood beside Sovereign in the selling ring, with the relaxed authority of a person who knows exactly what she has and exactly what it is worth. The Duke walked up to the mare. He ran his hand along her neck, checked her teeth, lifted a foreleg, assessed the hoof, standard procedure for any buyer, and he did it competently. Then he turned to Harriet and said, I will take her. Name your price. She is not for you, Harriet said. The Duke looked at her. I looked at her. The 2 stable hands who worked for her looked at her with the expression of men who have seen this before and are calculating the safest distance. I beg your pardon? She is not for you. You ride hard. I have seen you on the Ashford Road, and you push your horses past their limits. Sovereign is a sensitive mare. She requires patience and a light hand. You would ruin her in 6 months. Miss Ridley, I am not insulting your horsemanship, Your Grace. I am describing it. You are a strong rider with a heavy seat and a tendency to override in the last quarter mile. Sovereign does not need strength. She needs finesse. You do not have it. The silence in the selling ring was profound. 3 dozen horsemen, 2 dealers, a farrier, and a veterinary surgeon all stopped what they were doing and stared at the woman who had just told the Duke of Lyndhurst, to his face, in public, at a county fair, that he was not good enough for her horse. The Duke's jaw tightened. I knew that jaw. I had worked for him for 12 years, and that jaw meant one of 2 things. Either he was about to dismiss someone, or he was about to do something unexpected. On this occasion, he did the unexpected thing. You have seen me ride, he said. I have seen everyone ride. It is my business. I breed horses, Your Grace. Knowing who will treat them well is half the work, and you have decided I will not treat her well. I have decided you do not yet know how. That is not the same thing. What would convince you? Harriet looked at him. She looked at him with the appraising, unhurried assessment she gave to horses. The assessment that measured not what was in front of her, but what it could become. And she said, Ride for me. Not on Sovereign. On Bramble, my 4-year-old gelding. He is green and nervy, and will not tolerate a heavy hand. If you can bring him round the far paddock without forcing him, without overriding, without using anything except patience, I will consider selling you the mare. You are testing me. I am assessing you. I assess every buyer. The fact that you are a duke does not exempt you from the assessment. He rode for her. He rode Bramble, a young, skittish, thoroughly difficult gelding who spooked at shadows, refused the gate, and tried to scrape the duke off against the fence post. And he rode him badly. He rode him with the strength and command that worked on his own well-schooled hunters, and that was exactly wrong for a green horse with a nervous disposition. And the gelding fought him every stride, and Harriet stood at the paddock rail, with her arms folded and her face unreadable, and watched the Duke of Lyndhurst fail. He pulled up after 20 minutes, sweating, frustrated, and I could see it in his face, humiliated in a way that no social setback had ever humiliated him. Because this was not about rank or money. This was about skill, and his skill was not enough. You see, Harriet said. I see. You rode him the way you ride everything, with authority. But authority is not the same as understanding. Bramble does not need a commander. He needs a conversation. Show me. She showed him. She swung into the saddle with the easy, practiced grace of a woman who had been riding since she could walk. And she took Bramble around the paddock, and the transformation was immediate. The horse that had fought the Duke at every stride moved under Harriet like water, calm, responsive, willing, because she was not commanding him. She was listening to him. Her hands were light on the reins. Her seat was balanced, her weight centered, her legs quiet. She communicated with the horse through a language of small adjustments, a shift of weight, a softening of the rein, a murmur so quiet I could not hear it from the rail, and the horse answered. The Duke watched. He watched the way a man watches something that challenges everything he thought he knew, and I saw his expression change from frustration to something I had never seen on the Duke of Lyndhurst's face. Respect. You are better than I am, he said, when she dismounted. At this, yes. At running an estate and sitting in Parliament, I expect you are better than I am. We all have our skills. Will you teach me? Teach you what? To ride the way you ride, to listen to the horse, whatever it is you do that I do not. Harriet looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Lessons are on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 shillings an hour. Bring your own boots. He came on Tuesday. He came at 7 in the morning, in his riding boots, to a stud farm run by a woman half his age, and he submitted himself to instruction with a discipline that surprised me and, I suspect, surprised Harriet. She was not gentle with him. She corrected his seat, his hands, his balance, his timing. She made him ride without stirrups until his legs ached. She made him sit on Bramble and do nothing, absolutely nothing, until the horse relaxed beneath him, which took 40 minutes the first time, and 20 the second, and 10 by the third lesson. Patience, she said, when he asked what the lesson was. The horse is not a vehicle. He is a partner. You cannot force a partnership. You can only offer one and wait for the answer. He came on Thursday, and the following Tuesday, and the following Thursday. The Duke of Lyndhurst, who managed a 1,000-acre estate and sat in the House of Lords, rode to a small stud farm twice a week and let a 25-year-old woman tell him everything he was doing wrong. On the third lesson, she made him ride with his eyes closed. Feel the horse, she said. You are watching him instead of listening to him. Close your eyes. Let your body hear what he is telling you. The Duke closed his eyes and rode blind around the paddock, and for the first time, the gelding did not fight him, because for the first time, the Duke was not watching for problems and bracing against them. He was simply sitting, and the horse, sensing the change, simply carried him. There, Harriet said, when he opened his eyes. That is what riding is. Everything you were doing before was steering. He became a different rider in 6 weeks, and in the process, he became a different man. That is what Harriet did. Not deliberately, not by design, but by the simple fact of being someone who did not perform for him. The women the Duke met in drawing rooms adjusted their voices, their opinions, their laughter. Harriet did not adjust. She told him his hands were too strong, his timing was off, that he was sitting like a sack of grain. She told him these things in the same matter-of-fact tone she used with the stable hands, and the Duke, who had spent his adult life being agreed with, discovered that disagreement, delivered honestly, was the most refreshing thing anyone had ever offered him. I watched it happen from the stable yard. I watched the Duke arrive on Tuesdays and Thursdays with an eagerness that had nothing to do with horsemanship. I watched him linger after lessons, grooming horses he did not need to groom, mending tack he could have paid someone to mend, because lingering meant more time in the stable yard, and more time in the stable yard meant more time with Harriet. He helped her with the foaling. A mare went into labor on a Thursday night. A difficult birth. The foal turned wrong, and the Duke, who happened to be at the farm for a late lesson, rolled up his sleeves and knelt in the straw beside Harriet, and did exactly what she told him to do, without question. They worked for 2 hours, and the foal came into the world alive, and Harriet sat back on her heels in the straw, exhausted, with blood on her arms and tears on her face, the only tears I ever saw her shed, and said, "She will live. Thank you." The Duke looked at her, this capable, unperforming, extraordinary woman, sitting in straw with blood on her arms, weeping with relief over a foal she had saved. And the expression on his face was not the expression of a man evaluating a riding instructor. It was the expression of a man who has found something he did not know he was looking for and is terrified of losing it. He bought a horse, not Sovereign. Harriet still would not sell him Sovereign, and by this point, the refusal had become a standing joke between them, a ritual that meant something neither would name, but a 2-year-old filly named Pepper, who needed training, and who gave the Duke a reason to visit the farm on days that were not lesson days, for purposes that were, theoretically, equestrian. They talked while they worked, not the careful, structured conversation of a drawing room, but the easy, broken talk of people doing physical work side by side, sentences started and abandoned, observations about the weather, arguments about feed ratios that grew heated and ended in laughter. She told him about her father, how he had built the stud from nothing, how he had taught her that a horse's trust was the most valuable thing in the world, because it was the only thing that could not be bought. He told her about his own father, a cold man who had managed the estate like a military campaign, and who had never, in the Duke's memory, laughed. "He sounds like a man who steered," Harriet said. "He steered everything, including me. And now I am learning to ride with my eyes closed. It is an improvement." The county noticed. The county always notices when a Duke visits a woman's farm twice a week. The horseman at the Ashford Inn discussed it with professional interest. The vicar mentioned it to Mrs. Yardley, who mentioned it to me, who said nothing, because some things do not need a groom's commentary. On a Tuesday in December, the Duke arrived at the farm and found Harriet in the tack room, repairing a bridle by lamplight. It was 6 in the morning, an hour before his lesson, and she did not hear him come in. He stood in the doorway and watched her work, her strong fingers threading leather through the buckle with the same precise, unhurried skill she brought to everything. And I saw his face in the lamplight, and what I saw was not the face of a man watching his riding instructor. It was the face of a man watching the person he cannot stop thinking about do something ordinary, and finding the ordinary more beautiful than anything he has seen at court or in any drawing room in England. She looked up and saw him. "You are early." "I could not sleep." "There are cures for that, Your Grace. Warm milk, a long walk, a dull book. I tried all 3. I find I prefer coming here." She looked at him for a long moment, and then she handed him the bridle and said, "Make yourself useful then. This stitching needs doing, and your hands are steadier than mine before breakfast." It was the first time she had asked him for help with something that was not a lesson, and the Duke took the bridle and the needle and sat on the tack-room bench and stitched leather beside her in the lamplight, and neither of them said another word for 20 minutes, and neither of them needed to. After 3 months of lessons, the Duke rode Sovereign. Harriet put him on the mare on a cold morning in January, and he rode her around the far paddock with the light hands and balanced seat, and quiet patience that Harriet had spent 3 months teaching him, and the mare moved beneath him, the way she moved beneath Harriet, willingly, precisely, beautifully, and when he pulled up at the rail, Harriet was smiling. "You see," she said, "that is what she needed. Not strength, not authority, just listening. I have had a good teacher. You have had a stubborn one. Is there a difference? With horses, no. He asked her then. Not for the horse, for her. He dismounted, and he stood in the stable yard in his riding boots with Sovereign's reins in his hand and January frost on his coat, and he said, Harriet, I came here 3 months ago to buy a horse. You refused to sell her to me because I was not good enough. You were right. I was not good enough, for the horse or for anything else worth having. You have spent 3 months teaching me patience, and I have learned it. And the most patient thing I have done is wait 3 months to tell you that I am not coming here for the lessons. I am coming here for you. Harriet looked at him. She looked at him with the same appraising, unhurried assessment she had given him at the fair, except that now the assessment included 3 months of mornings and 2 hours in a lambing stall, and the knowledge that this proud, commanding man had submitted to correction and learned from it, which was the rarest thing she had ever seen in a horseman or a man. And Sovereign? She said. I no longer want to buy Sovereign. Why not? Because she belongs with you, and I would rather be where she is than own her somewhere else. She married him in March at the parish church, and Sovereign stood in the churchyard, Harriet insisted, because the mare had started everything and deserved to see how it ended. The county horseman attended, and the stable hands, and the vicar who had married Harriet's parents 30 years before, and John Yardley, the head groom, who stood in the back pew and thought about what he had always known, that there are 2 kinds of people in the world, those who understand horses and those who think they do, and that the Duke of Lyndhurst had spent 34 years in the second category before a woman with strong hands and no patience for pretense moved him, permanently, into the first. She fought the Duke over a horse for 3 hours. He bought a different horse, then came for her, and the woman who refused to sell him a mare because he was not good enough spent 3 months teaching him to be better, not just at riding, but at the patience and the listening and the honest, unperforming attention that horses require and love demands, which are, in the end, the same thing.